Great. Thank you, Alex, for the introduction and very interesting. Both previous presentations. I would have loved to continue talking more about reporting in economics. I think that's a very interesting topic, and I would love to chat more actually later with Aaron. Now I want to talk about something that would benefit from transparent reporting and can provide a little bit of a track towards transparent reporting. It's a what we call an open policy analysis project applied to deworming interventions. As Alex said, I'm a project scientist here at BITSS. We are sort of like sneaking this presentation in this panel, even though there's no paper yet, but there's an output that I want to share with you. I would love to have feedback on what this output looks like. I think that one of the things I'm trying to wrap around our heads a bit is what the final product of a open policy analysis will look like. So first of all, the work that I will be sharing with you today and will be presenting has benefit from the collaboration with many people, including the core BITSS team, a fantastic group of undergraduate arrays, and also the NGO Evidence Action that has helped us to identify the key components of our open policy analysis for deworming. And even though all these people has played a great role, any responsibility of what you will see here, any errors I'm to blame for. So in terms of the presentation, I will try to, my goal was to talk for 20 minutes and then discuss after, but if you want to jump in the middle, you're welcome. I'll just give you a brief introduction, demonstrate what this open policy analysis for deworming looks like, and discuss lessons that we have learned from this exercise. So the motivation, and this was, I was a little bit skeptical of going with this. This is my standard motivation, our standard motivation lately to discuss open policy analysis, but given the current events, people might be a little bit more sensitive to this. But the motivation for why to bring open science to policy analysis is a core concern is there's this rise of alternative facts. On the left, we have the picture that led to the emergence of the term alternative facts, where people were disputing the size of crowds in the inauguration of the president in the US 4 years ago. And this is is usually seen as a odd thing to do, like as an anomaly in some sense. But on the right, we have something that is seen with much more lenience or acceptance, at least from the academic community or the policy analysis community, where here there's an interaction and interviewer is asking a senator about the role of unemployment insurance during the pandemic, and she's saying, we have looked at what economists are saying, and there's no measurable evidence that people are staying at home because of the $600 unemployment insurance. And the senator scoffs and says, I don't know which economist you're talking about, but blah, 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 and cites his own evidence. And this is something that was happening way before the rise of alternative facts. The idea that we are comfortable with people citing what should be facts, the role of unemployment insurance on people staying at home or not, as something that could be up for debate. And this is particularly prevalent when it comes to policy analysis. And here the difference between policy analysis and research will be that policy analysis is some type of data analysis meant to inform a specific policy debate. So what would be the role of open science in I'm not implying that the opaqueness of policy analysis is behind the rise of alternative facts. I am suggesting that it could be part of the solution in ameliorating this. This is not going to be a magic bullet, but we hope it will be a small contribution to reduce this problem. And the idea is that as scholars in economics, like Mansky, and in political science, like Westernick, has been talking for a while now, there's this tendency in policy analysis for people to report results that are wildly in opposition to each other about the same key quantity without disclosing any uncertainty, any assumptions, and things like that. Well, Wassernick talks about this idea of report wars, where people would arrive to the table and basically with different reports of the same policy issue. And again, we're kind of like comfortable with the idea that two policy reports can describe the same facts. And the mechanism towards alternative facts, I think it's that low credibility of policy analysis can lead to its credibility being assessed mainly on the basis of reputation on who produces the report. This idea of whether or not this person is serious or not, this agency is serious or not. But the problem is that the term serious or reputation, it's very much on the eye of the beholder, and it varies. We suspect it varies across political positions. So that this is a path for people reading different reports. So as a first step, I see Sean. It's in the room. My collaborators Sean Grant, Ted Miguel, and I wrote a paper that was recently published in the Journal of Science and Public Policy, where we basically argue this parallel between a reproducibility crisis in science or a credibility crisis in science and something similar but less visible in policy analysis. And also we proposed the translation of the solutions from open science to policy analysis, and we call it open policy analysis. We propose 3 core principles of open output, open analysis, and open materials. And we also propose an agenda to implement and document how OPA can be applied into several policy issues. Today I will be showing you a project of open policy analysis that is the logical sequence of this agenda. In addition to the work we have done, it's important to highlight that there's several people in the policy analysis space that are moving towards more transparency and reproducibility. There's the Open Source Policy Center. The Congressional Budget Office has also developed interesting tools and has released some data. There's people in environmental, in the Environmental Policy Agency, and people who do environmental assessments, particularly related to social cost of carbon, has been clearly moving in this direction. Our contribution is more along the lines of providing a framework and testing that framework. So let's bring this framework to deworming interventions. Deworming interventions are a public health intervention meant to address parasitic worms, which are endemic in many countries. They disproportionately affect children and the poor. And basically they affect nutrient uptake, which can lead to serious consequences on human health, education, and long-term economic well-being. A popular approach has been the implementation of mass deworming interventions at the school level, where everybody receives a very inexpensive treatment to address worms interventions, regardless whether they have it or not. The setting where the main findings have come to describe the role of deworming, it was a study that started in Kenya in the years 1998 and 1999, and it had a very high prevalence rates of infections. The implementation costs were very low, around $42 cents per round of treatment, and the length of treatment was relatively short in terms of treatment that is usually applied for over the entire elementary school or a longer schooling period. There are current deworming interventions around the world that have different characteristics in terms of prevalence, in terms of implementation costs, and also in terms of length of treatment. And also another characteristic that it's of our interest to study open policy analysis is that there has been a strong debate around the initial results of the deworming study. This is the debate, so-called the worm wars, that Hoces summarizes this debate under the perspective of computational reproducibility. And basically, his summary is that the main differences between the original study and the reanalysis has to do with how the differences found in the reanalysis are communicated, in the sense that the main results seem to be robust, but there's this tendency to highlight what are the one or two few specifications that reveal different results. But for our purposes, the most important thing is that there is a strong debate around this topic. So we can think of other debates that have a similar flavor, something like the debate on the minimum wage, the debate on the role of immigration on employment and wages, the debate of the burden of tax in the US, the distributional burden of tax, and others. One feature that I want to highlight is that open policy analysis will not guarantee agreement on key research findings, but it would avoid the idea of having multiple reports starting from these different sources of research. Our goal is to provide one platform for people to input the different assumptions and parameters that will go into an analysis. So in our paper, we argue that we should move away from the idea of having a sort of like a big report that it's fairly opaque into something that's more like a layered product, where we will have first just one output to inform the policymakers, being cognizant that policymakers are time constrained, they need to make decisions, and we don't want to give them 20 outputs for them to consciously or unconsciously pick what they might fit their priors best. But I think that we want to link that output pretty clearly with the underlying assumptions and parameters. And that would be the principle of open output. A second principle would be open analysis, where basically there's an extensive and clear documentation that explains how that output was obtained. And finally, there are all the materials underlying as a principle of open materials that for this audience, it's basically the idea of computational reproducibility. So that's the framework, and with that framework, our contributions to with our open policy analysis for deworming are the following. We went through the work of identifying one policy estimate among several alternatives. This was in communication and conversations with Evidence Action, and establish a clear link between that policy estimate and the underlying assumptions. We added documentation to increase reproducibility of past methodologies and the current one used here. And we created a repository with all the materials for a one-click reproducibility environment. That's the goal in terms of contributions. Now I will show you how this open policy analysis looks like, and if there's time, I'm happy to go over some lessons that we got from it. So I'll go through each principle. So the first principle is this idea of open output, and I will one thing I forgot to I wanted to share the link for these slides so people can jump in if they want.
It's already in the chat. Fernando.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Slides, yeah.
Okay. So if you're welcome to follow along, you can click here, and basically I will take you to the first layer of this open policy analysis, which is a interactive app that first of all starts with a one output, which is the net lifetime income effects of deworming for each treated children. And the idea is that this will be the information that is meant to inform the policymaker. And with this, policymakers will make different decisions. This open output also has to have and let me also describe a little bit. To achieve this output, we look at what has done before in terms of policy analysis for deworming, and then we discuss with a policy partner, which would be Evidence Action, on what would be the relevant costs and benefits to inform the different policymakers around the world. And with that, we modified slightly the previous policy analysis and focus on this one output. Then when it comes to the key underlying assumptions, another feedback that Evidence Action gave us was that basically now the unit cost varies heavily across regions. India, for example, has, I think, something like 0.06 cents of cost per unit of treatment, while Nigeria has something like close to $8. The prevalence of deworming also varies by regions, and the length of treatment also varies significantly. So now here, staffers could adapt the key parameters, the key assumptions, and update it. I will and update it and see how the results change. Before I update it, one thing I wanted to change is just change the number of simulations so this runs faster. So here I could say 6.5, and it should update. This is one of the tricky. Well, then update. Yeah. And if you want to go even further, you can see all the assumptions that go into this analysis. Here, the assumptions and parameters are split into research, coming from research, coming from data, coming from guesswork. The main parameter coming from research is the treatment effect that comes from the latest paper on deworming interventions, but also other important parameters that are somewhat overlooked in these discussions. I think like the prevalence rates, take-up rates, years of treatment in the original study, in the new settings, and things like that. And the idea is that with this open output, it's meant to where is it here? It's meant to provide the clear linkage between the different assumptions and the final output. We provide high-level equations to make it easier for the user to see where the different parameters and assumptions go into the respective equations. We also add the feature to modify the underlying standard deviations to see how the uncertainty changes as you change different components. And one thing, foreseeing that people might still have differences in what are the key underlying components that go into this, we allow for people to modify what they have, but they can still, once they are done and they choose what the version of the best representation of the fact is, they can output the parameters and have sort of like a timestamp version of how are they, what's their best policy analysis. That will be for the open output, but as I said, an important part is to have a clear and open analysis, basically a fully transparent analysis. And here we use the technology of dynamic documentation to combine all the narrative to explain where this figure is coming from. All the narrative, it's combined with equations. So there's a narrative explanation, that there's going to be an equation that explains that step, and after the equation there's going to be the code that implements that step. And in this for this exercise, we went through the process of adding some missing details on how to reproduce the different policy analysis from before, from previous studies, and we basically with the idea of clarifying what each component is, and the idea is that this could be readable by somebody who doesn't have to have a strong mathematical background, so they should read the narrative explanation. That should be helpful already. If they want more detail, they're going to have the equations, and if they want more detail, they're going to have the code that implements those steps. On top of that, we also verify the computational reproducibility of the previous results. So basically, these would be the results that are already described in previous studies, and we went through the steps of using their key sources, obtain the same results. And these numbers are computed within the dynamic document. So this should be at the analysis level, it should be fully transparent for different users. So I think I covered all these components. And one additional thing is that we presented all these steps in a layered fashion, precisely with trying to avoid or overwhelming the reader. So if somebody just wants to read the narrative, they go with the narrative. And the final step is this idea of open materials, where here, what basically we did is that we put all this work into a public repository that the idea is that people can download into their computer, and with minimal effort, they should be able to reproduce the original, both dynamic document and the app. This repository has several advantages, has version control, so everybody can see what has happened in the process of building this. I put it achieves one-click reproducible documentation and the app. One-click conditional on you having RStudio installed and R installed and those other things. It has a clear folder structure. All the data is in there, and also we went through the process of automating how all the contributions are acknowledged, so people can see at least who has played a role in this. So that's the idea of the open policy analysis for deworming, and this is a common structure that we want to implement across different policy issues. Right now, all this is public and all the links are available for you to see, but basically we had to reach a point in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, where we will basically put something on a main page in our website and say this is the open policy analysis for deworming, and this will be our version 1.0, so to say. In terms of lessons, we learn a lot in doing this exercise, and we would like to share this a little bit. So one of the things that I wanted to get into is that I want to emphasize the role of these three principles, how they have to interact at the same time, because even if one fails, you can still run into a path where at the end of the day, policymakers can end up choosing their own best representation of the facts. So here I just illustrate what happens if one principle fails. So if we were to have a opaque output, so here what we're assuming is that the analysis is fully transparent, the materials are fully available, it's completely reproducible, but the reporting of the output, it's not so transparent, and it's not so transparent in a sense that it does the following things. So first of all, it puts a lot of information in front of the reader that for a researcher this might be helpful because they can see how the different how results might be robust, or how to obtain different results for different contexts and things like that. But for policy analysts, this is a bit problematic, because say that you're interested in obtaining that one number. Say, okay, what's the net present value of deworming interventions that best represents the comparison of costs and benefits? Where are the costs here? Where are the benefits? Just to give you an idea, to achieve the cost that evidence action was looking for, we had to sort of like review this table and figure out that somewhere around here, you need to combine three of these elements. I think it's this component with this one and this one that will give you the costs, and the same idea with the benefits. You need to sort of like know how to aggregate them, and this links a little bit to the previous presentations. That one thing that I wanted to jump in and related to the previous conversation is that another benefit of having a transparent reporting, and for me, one of the biggest benefits of having transparent reporting, is that you need to know very clearly how to use the results of a paper to inform either a systematic review, a meta-analysis, or a policy analysis. And that's one of the biggest gaps, I would say, in social sciences, but particularly in economics, in my opinion. In this sense, here it will be hard for policy analysts to identify what the relevant pieces are. It's easy, especially if you present a table like this and you give it directly to policymakers or staffers. They can go straight up. If they are opponents of these issues, they can look around here. What's the smallest value? And say like, maybe this is the one that we should be looking in terms of discussing the roles of deworming, or maybe this if you are a supporter, something like that. And this is a tendency that's consciously or unconsciously people will gravitate to the result that fits their priors best. And another issue is that's not disclosed any uncertainty related to what Aaron was talking. And this is something that it's my view that I think it creates an unclear separation between the role of the policy analysts and the policymaker, in the sense that the role of the policymaker is to make decisions. They receive information, they weigh cost and benefits, they weigh who's benefit, who's harmed by a policy, and they make a decision. That's my understanding of the role. The role of the policy analyst is to provide that information. But if the policy analyst starts saying, on the one hand this, and on the one hand this other thing, and on this scenario this, or on this other scenario this other thing, basically they open up the field for the policymaker to choose things. And this is something that's not new. Harry Truman, president of the US in the 1950s, famously came out with the idea that he wanted a 100 economists, because he hated this idea of people saying on the one hand this, on the other hand that, it depends for this, it depends for that. At least in policy, policy analysts should be burdened with the responsibility of providing the best representation of the facts. And I think that dodging that role, it's what contributes to the current situation. A same discussion can be done for open materials. I'm gonna skip it in the interest of time. I want to talk a little bit about the lessons that we learn in the process of building this OPA project. This is sort of like a stylized timeline of how to build a OPA project. This is something we would encourage for people to follow something like this, because the process of starting with either with the Shiny app first, and then moving to the dynamic document, and then having things somewhat out of order can make this a little bit more burdensome. And here we suggest first basically to start reviewing the previous documentation, discuss with the original analysts and authors how to achieve computational reproducibility, then discuss with a policy partner on what is the evidence that they need to look at. Ideally, pre-specify that in some sense. Make just a doodle of the app, and then go and basically obtain a full, complete dynamic document. And once you're done with that, then you move and develop the app to inform policymakers. Some useful practices that we develop while building this project is that one thing that is hidden for the viewer, but I would like to highlight, is that the information in the dynamic document, in the report, and in the app are connected in the sense that everything that happens in a dynamic document at the end of the day is outputted into a code script that then it's inputted into the app. So whatever you change into the dynamic document will eventually change the app. That's something that something we put a lot of effort to make it work, because if you want to put this out there and allow for people to modify things, you don't want people to start modifying the app or the dynamic document and go in different directions.
I think with that, we're running on time, Fernando. The other session is probably going to start in about 2 minutes from now. So I think we have time for one more question, or maybe concluding remarks from you if there aren't any burning questions right now.
Maybe a very quick question, since this relates directly to comments I've been receiving over the last couple of days from economists thinking about reproducibility. This goes way beyond reproducibility. This goes into interactive and robust reproducibility. In the distribution of effort, this is way out at the end. Authors are already sort of wondering what benefits they get from ensuring that at the tail end of their analysis, they have reproducible code that they can submit to journals, whether it's ours or others. This means thinking completely different from the start about how you can even structure the article that you're thinking of. How much extra effort is that?
Thank you, Lars, for allowing me to talk about this slide that I had to fly over. But yeah, so this is something I was trying to emphasize, that this is the idea of open policy analysis is something that we want at the end of the day for policy analysts to be incorporating into their workflow. Momentarily, basically, it's us as BITSS or other organizations making their own open policy analysis, but eventually our target population is for people who do policy analysis to incorporate this. And it is expensive. Right now, it requires a lot of work. This is just an estimate of the level of effort per year, a distilled version for an average policy analysis. And by no means all policy analysis should have an open policy analysis, but there are certain characteristics that justify it. So I think topics where there's strong disagreement on the facts, recurrent reports. So this cost-benefit analysis that the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank do to approve loans for aid, they could, if they are recurrent enough, they could benefit from having this structure, and also topics that have large carbon and things like that. I think we're going to run out of time, but thank you very much, Lars, for that question that allowed me to talk about this.